Alrighty, looks like we have a good group that has joined so far. I'll continue to let the participants in as they flow, but let's go ahead and get started. Again, thank you all so much for joining. My name is Morgan Serrano. I am here with Yellowbird, and we're so excited to have one of our Canary Club partners, Safety for Nonprofit, here with us. This is a Canary Club partner that I'm very excited to work with, and they are allowing volunteer opportunities to all of our safety professionals and even other safety professionals outside of Yellowbird. They have a really great presentation for you all today. I will be adding the communication and contact info into the chat today. If you have any questions for Sharon as she presents, please feel free to put them in the chat. She may even, have an open floor discussion opportunity for you. With that, I'm going to go ahead and pass it over to you, Sharon. Thank you.
Well, hi, thank you and good morning, and thanks for joining me. I'm really excited to be here talking about safety for nonprofits and together with our partner Yellowbird. As you can see, our motto is people volunteering and giving back shouldn't get hurt when doing good, and that's what I'm going to talk about today. Just a brief introduction. I am the Arizona team lead for Safety for Nonprofits, and I'm also an Encore Fellow, which is a program I did after retiring from Intel. I worked at Intel in their environmental health and safety group for almost 28 years and retired last year, and was already involved with Safety for Nonprofit, but got more involved in this past year. We're going to start talking about what do we do and why do we need an organization called Safety for Nonprofits. So really, I'm starting by a call to action to you, our occupational health and safety community. First of all, get out there and support your local nonprofit by volunteering. They need you. Nonprofits, while a large sector we're going to talk about later, always need volunteers, and especially dedicated volunteers like the people I know are on this call. When you're out there volunteering, think about whether this nonprofit needs help with occupational health and safety, and offer that to them in a gentle way. We'll talk a little bit about some of the challenges with that. But if you're ready to volunteer with a nonprofit, we're ready to support your pro bono work. One of the concerns that people frequently say is, well, what about liability insurance? What about support? What if I'm not comfortable with some of the work? They need something, say, both about trip assessments and fall protection, and I don't know enough about fall protection. Well, through us, we can help you with that. You can sign up to be a volunteer. We have a brief online training, and then we want you to sign our code of conduct form, and that helps you be covered by liability insurance. And then you will work with a state or virtual team lead to start the volunteering. And then if you don't have an immediate need or you don't know a nonprofit, help spread the word to your friends in the profession or to a nonprofit that you've run into. And then, of course, we're always happy to take donations. So why do we care about this? Well, hazards at nonprofits injure and kill volunteers, unfortunately, almost every week in the US. And when you look at a nonprofit, they typically have very limited resources. Last year, I was at a nonprofit here that has a large warehouse. They ship a lot of equipment around, but they actually have one employee, and everybody else is a volunteer. And so those folks have a huge scope, right? They're trying to run the operation. They're trying to make sure everything's going well. They're still recruiting volunteers. They're doing social media. They may not know much about health and safety. And then when you look at it, there's also limited OSHA oversight. There's no regulatory framework to protect volunteers at nonprofits. So there's not necessarily that regulatory drive coming in with inspections. When you think about nonprofits, sometimes people think about the big ones, right? Habitat for Humanity, the Red Cross, but mostly it's actually made up of smaller organizations, and that's really where we're focusing. In the Safety for Nonprofits, we're not looking to supplant the consultants like some of you may be. We're looking to supplement for groups that may never hire a consultant because they don't even know they need one, and they don't have the resources or money to hire one. And they don't know where to start in building a proactive safety program. So there's more than 1 million 501c nonprofits in the US, and they have 12 million employees and more than 64 million volunteers. So it's a huge sector in the world, and it was a big surprise to me coming from the corporate world to see how much there is out there with nonprofits. But there's a lot of scope for us. Unfortunately, there's a lot of safety scope as well. So I have a couple of examples of incidents that are very tragic. For instance, a person who was volunteering at the Humane Society and was killed by a dog that attacked her. Or as we all know, vehicles can be a high source of hazards at anywhere you are. And here was a volunteer who was pinned between two vehicles during a food drive, right? So everybody's focused. And that's really the thing about these nonprofits. They're very focused on their mission. So everybody's focused on filling the boxes and carrying them out. But then suddenly you don't notice that car and then somebody unfortunately was killed. The other interesting thing about nonprofits is their scope is huge. So here we have two that you might not even think about. One is a historic ship in Galveston, Texas, where somebody was working on the ship as a volunteer and tragically fell. And another person who was working on a farm. So, I mean, the scope and breadth of these nonprofits is huge. So it's also kind of an interesting opportunity to see what's out there and maybe something that you don't normally see in your work, but this is something where you can help with. There's not a ton of statistics, but there is one Bureau of Labor Statistics report that showed that from 2003 to 2007, one volunteer worker per week died while performing work. So there's really a lot of opportunity for us to make an impact with these organizations, because by helping them, we're not only, of course, helping their volunteers and their workers, but we're helping them also achieve their mission. So that brings us to safety for nonprofits. What are we here for? Well, we're here to provide expert and free advisory service. And it's really interesting. Nonprofits get hit up a lot with companies that try to sell them stuff. Grant writing, catering, printing, anything you can think of, somebody's trying to sell it to a nonprofit. And when we come in, we need to explain that we're free, just like them. We're a nonprofit too. And so our goal is to help these nonprofits really reduce the injuries, reduce risk. And it's people like the folks that have called in today, partnering with organizations to do assessments, to do training, and then help them to minimize work. Everything that we've learned at school, everything we've learned on the job, we can implement at these nonprofits. So I'm going to let Jack Geisert, who's the Safety for Nonprofit founder and president, just speak for a moment here.
Hello, I'm Jack Geisert, a founder and president of Safety for Nonprofits. I want to personally thank you for your interest in joining our organization and giving back to the charities in your community. Sharon started to explain the why and the what of Safety for Nonprofits. She'll go into that in more details, but I just want to explain that our purpose is to deliver technical support and services, professional services to the nonprofits in our local communities. And if you're interested in doing that, join our organization. We cover you with professional liability insurance, and you're able to go out and do good and not worry about losing your assets. So again, thank you. And we look forward to working with you, and hopefully we have time at the end for some questions and answers.
So what are our core services? First of all, we want to raise awareness. So letting nonprofits know that we're out there to support them and that health and safety is something that they need to prioritize and value. One of the ways we do that is we've put out these Safety 101 trainings to a few of these nonprofit organizations. And then we've done training for leaders and volunteers on a variety of topics, trip hazard reduction, incident reporting, violence prevention, things like that. And then we get into providing our consulting services. We've done both virtual ones where we're not present. Maybe the organization doesn't need us to come, or maybe it's too far away for us to reach. And then we've done more of the on-site kind, which is kind of the traditional thing that you might do, walk on site, do a walkthrough, provide a risk report, provide training, things along those lines. And I'm going to talk about a few of our clients here going forward. So what have we been working on? Well, like I mentioned, there's these Alliance of State Nonprofit Organizations. It's a great way to reach nonprofits and let them know we're there for them. We've got new and ongoing clients, the Furniture Bank that Jack's going to talk about here in a moment. We've done safety training at museum-type locations, including here in Arizona. And then we've got new clients, theaters, shelters, STEM centers. There's a lot of maker spaces out there, medical equipment, and more. We've got some partnerships with the ABSA, which is the American Biological Society. We've got Wombat Safety, which is our software partner, and then today Yellowbird is again a great opportunity to reach the Yellowbird folks here. And then this is one of my focuses, deploying a standard onboarding process for all the volunteers, making sure that we get everybody trained and that we have a good process so we get started well, and then implementing the new software that we've got, which tracks volunteers and lets us have better documentation. Our goals in 2024 are to continue expanding our services in all of our regions, increase our visibility on LinkedIn. So if you're not following us on LinkedIn, please go ahead. And I think Morgan's going to drop the link later in the chat. We're going to continue partnering with health and safety societies. I'm going to talk about that in a minute. And then just build capacities. We need to be strong and organized so that we can support our clients and then get client feedback on how we're doing. We are working with a bunch of professional organizations. We gave a great talk last year to the BCSP team. And then on April 22nd, we're giving a talk to a joint AIHA-ACGIH presentation. And so I'm really trying to reach out to the profession, make sure that the professionals know about us so that they can volunteer, and that they can also let nonprofits know about us. So here's an example of one of the nonprofits that we continue to support and also how we started supporting them.
When we actually start to look at the types of nonprofits and those that would benefit from safety and health services, we have the example of the Furniture Bank in Massachusetts, where the idea for safety for nonprofits started. And in this example, where they receive donated furniture and provided to at risk families and individuals, there's a significant risk for pedestrian and vehicular struck-by incidents, musculoskeletal injuries, ergonomics. Their repair shop has a number of safety and health items. So in initially providing services, pro bono services to this furniture bank, they have since benefited greatly from the prioritized recommendations for improving safety, and it's led to safety for nonprofits.
So one of our clients from last year is an organization that collects medical equipment, and they're going to talk about this in a minute. And our volunteers were able to come in, prioritize what they needed, deliver forklift safety training, power and hand tool safety, and material handling. And from what you'll hear, I mean, this is an organization that has impacted millions of people across the world. And we're able to help them keep running safely. So I'll just let them speak for themselves.
Hi, my name is Aaron Bolsel. I'm the president of Mesa Sharing, and we are so thankful to have partnered with you guys for all the help you've given us already. Mesa started 15 years ago back in Oregon. My wife and I went to West Africa. I do ultrasound imaging, and I train doctors and train some techs also to do x-ray. I have that background. It changed our lives, and we sent our first container within the year to the Ivory Coast, and we were hooked. And so we've been going strong for that long. Our goal is to relieve suffering wherever we can, and we've been shipping mainly to Africa. We've been able to affect the lives of about 1.5 million people throughout about 8 countries in Africa, and we are just very excited about what's happening. We're growing, and the opportunities are there, and we're just doing whatever we can. It's all volunteers to help people all over the world.
My name is Dennis Henry. I'm a volunteer and safety coordinator for Mesa. We'd like to thank Jim Colbert for hooking us up with Safety for Nonprofits. Through Jim, we met Cassie Braun, and Cassie graciously drove down to Pueblo West for a training session. Cassie was very well prepared, presented a thorough presentation. After the presentation, we took our written test, we took our driving test, and thankfully all 4 of us passed. I believe that with Cassie's presentation, we now have a better safety program in place for all of our volunteers. Again, thank you to Safety for Nonprofits for all you've done for us.
Thank you.
So it's a really great feeling to get to hear this impact that you're making. Sometimes at work, it can take us years to get that. We may not see the end result. I think with nonprofits, you can kind of really see a better connection right away that you're giving back and using your skills. So here's a completely different organization that you may not have thought of needs safety health. This is again, a volunteer of ours that already was volunteering with this organization and then suggested that she provide some health and safety. This theater is in a more than 100-year-old building. Not only they have productions in it, but they actually in the summer have people that sleep there, that stay for the whole summer for the summer theater. And so you think about all the operations you have to do, lifting, carrying stuff, lighting, fire protection. There's quite a lot of scope. And so she was able to come in, look at several theater productions and the set up, do a lot of safety walkthroughs, and really, again, made kind of a big impact. You look at these things that she suggested around flammable storage practices, respiratory protection, fire protection, emergency training. You're really making a big impact helping a nonprofit like this. We've got some clients here in Arizona I can talk through. We've even got Carrie, who's here in the picture on the bottom there. Our support to them started in 2022. We focused on a trip fall assessment and gave them a written report that you'll hear about in a moment. And then in 2023, came back and provided training to the employees. And so this is kind of an interesting feeling. I came from a large organization where, we had a lot of equipment. If you needed a ladder, it was there. And then in these nonprofits, you kind of have to focus on what can they get done, what's feasible for them, and really tailor your recommendations for the operation. So in this case, we did a very comprehensive review. Here's an example of things that we took pictures as Carrie and I were actually up on that stairwell with no handrail. And then we provided them a nice report that showed where the higher and lower risks were. And again, I'm just going to let the client speak for herself here.
Hi, I'm Kari Carlisle. I'm the Executive Director for Heritage Square Foundation. Heritage Square Foundation is the nonprofit partner of the City of Phoenix in the operation of Heritage Square Park in downtown Phoenix. We are a historic site, the last remaining residential block from the original town site of Phoenix. And we have 10 historic buildings, including the 1895 Rawson House Museum. We came to learn about safety for nonprofits just about 2 or 3 years ago. And even though as an executive director, I'm terribly busy with all of the executive directory kind of things that that nonprofits do, I did recognize that there was a need to understand where we were in terms of safety, especially when it comes to all of these historic buildings and not just our staff, but so many visitors. And so we invited Safety for Nonprofits to come out to our space and walk around, and we had great conversations with the team there at Safety for Nonprofits, and came up with a great plan that really met our needs. We had them do a complete trip and fall assessment of the entire park. And now the City of Phoenix is actually going to do a complete repaving project that will address really the vast majority of these trip and fall issues here at the park, which is going to make a big difference. We've also done training for our staff, and which really helps us to understand just the impact of all these everyday little things that we do, and how we can not just be safer, but just recognizing how just normal things that you might think you would do at home are really not that safe. And so So we're doing so much better as a staff. We've got better procedures in place, and really it's all to thank. We have Safety for Nonprofits to thank for everything that we've been able to accomplish here at Heritage Square. So want to thank Safety for Nonprofits for everything.
So just a couple of examples of additional clients that we've got. Here's an organization that recycles also literal tons of both computers and electronic equipment. As you can imagine, they've got a lot of material movement hazards. They're using forklifts. They've got some chemicals that they use, things like that. So with our volunteers, we were able to come in, identify some continuous improvements, give them a report, and create some documentation for, say, battery handling. And one of our later clients, this is actually an organization that AIHA highlighted last year when they were here for a conference, and they provided them with a donation. And we went in, they have a really amazing robotics organization. They have very large robots that the teenagers work on. And then they have a pretty big machine shop with lathes and drill presses and laser cutters. And so we were able to do a safety review of the operations. We had 4 different volunteers there. And gave them a report. And then they're now also, again, using our software partner to document their safety requirements for their volunteer and students and track training. So here, again, you might work for a large organization and you take all that software stuff for granted, but in small organizations, they may not have access to those kind of resources. So it's great that we can, help them get this kind of training in place and track it. So if you're not in one of the couple of states where we've got a state leaders, no worries. We've got that virtual team form. We've got a virtual team state leader. And again, all our volunteers are covered with not only professional liability insurance, but we've got training, we've got peer quality control and support, we've got a toolkit, and we've got mentorship. So just don't let the fact that you might be not an expert in everything, you can use your expertise to help a nonprofit and then get other volunteers to cover the things that you might not be an expert with. So again, we want to make sure that we're matching folks and that really people are going out and soliciting nonprofits to let them know that this opportunity is there for them and it's free. So this is where we've currently got volunteers. So if you're in one of those gray states, please step up. We'd love to have more volunteers from the states we don't have volunteers in. Really, when you look at this, this is the same kind of thing if you're a consultant that you do, except we're focusing on those small nonprofits that aren't really going to go off and hire a consultant on their own. We identify the client, make sure we understand what they need, document a draft scope of work, and then we've got kind of a go, no-go process. We can't cover everything. We're not going to do things like asbestos sampling, combustible dust, things like that. We're going to refer those folks to a consultant that can help them with it. But for things that we can't help with that are in our scope, we're going to then sign an agreement with them, establish a schedule for delivery, and then go off and deliver those services. We make sure we do a peer review of our report. And then again, we have a final, client continuous feedback loop, making sure that we're learning from our experiences. We've got some tools for our volunteers. Risk assessment tools, site inspection templates, JHA templates, things like that. So you're not starting from scratch when you're going out to volunteer. And then no discussion of doing work in the nonprofit world is not complete without the challenges, right? Just like any other nonprofit, we've got challenges making sure we can get time for volunteers. A lot of us are used to volunteering in, kind of this specific scope. Come to the food bank from 10 to 2, do your work and then leave. Volunteering in this capacity can be a little different. We don't always know how long it's going to take. We don't know how much work it's going to be until we get there, just like it is at work. So sometimes it's a little harder to tell people, hey, we want you to volunteer, but we don't know how long it's going to take. But we try to make sure to break it down into measurable chunks. And so, for instance, we've got somebody right now that we're working with. They have a maker space. We had one person who was able to go on site. And then we're going to get documents that people are going to review offline, so they don't need to come there. We want to be sure we're matching the right skills. And then finding clients. You know, again, in the corporate world, sometimes they already know why they need a health and safety. Nonprofits, we need to do a good job of explaining to them why they need us. And teaching volunteers how to be consultants. They're gonna need to go out and sell services. They're gonna need to be very concise about what we're gonna do, what we're not gonna do. And then making sure that we're keeping our records correctly, that we've got something we can produce in case there's a question later or we want to try again. We want to be sure we're delivering consistent services, so that's why it's important to have mentorship and sustain our process. And then I think finally, you know, we want to be sure we have succession planning, that we've got new people coming into the organization, so that's why I'm here today. And of course, there's always sustaining fundraising. Basically, the vast majority of our money goes to pay for insurance and promotional materials a little bit. So that's the kind of things that all nonprofits have to deal with. Very briefly, we do have organizational structure. We've got a board of director and an executive committee, and then some sub-teams that work on different portions of the organization to make sure that we're covering things. We have some regulatory required things where we have to file every year as a nonprofit. So these are the kind of things that we have to focus on. If any of you are interested in an internship or you know somebody who is, we've had interns in the past, and so we're definitely interested in that. And so contact us if you're interested. And, you know, just think about this. Why would you want to provide pro bono services to a charity? There's a lot to said for it. You can really help them. I think most of us have gotten into this job because we want to help others, and this is a great opportunity to do that. Opportunity for professional and personal growth. You get to look at something that might not be something you do every day. And you meet other folks. I got to meet some folks that used to work for OSHA here. It's really an interesting opportunity. If you're already working with a nonprofit, you're the best person to know if they need some health and safety support, and you can give back to your community. So really urge everybody to take a look at that and consider that. So if there's any questions or comments, please put those in the chats now, or you can always contact me through our website or through our email account. So thank you very much for your time. And if there's any question, we can take those now.
Great job, Sharon. And one thing I just want to highlight, safety for nonprofits is something that I personally, outside of having met them and working with them, it's something I never would have thought of. There's all these nonprofits going on and they're providing great to the community and to the greater good. And we need to keep them safe also. And so I think this is such a fantastic opportunity. It looks like we have a question in the chat. Casey asks, volunteering can be used for CIH and CM. Is that correct?
Yes, from what we've understood, BCSP has a specific, I think, location in their point system. And when I spoke to the IH, the CIH folks, basically it's part of your practice. So showing that you're doing industrial hygiene work.
Awesome, great question. Alrighty, if there's any other questions, please feel free to drop them in the chat. Otherwise, we have added all of the links necessary in the chat box, and we will be providing this recording to Sharon and Safety for Nonprofits, as well as Yellowbird will have it as well, so you can pass it on to those that were unable to join today or also rewatch and receive this important information again. Thank you all so much, and again, Sharon, thank you so much for your time today.
Thank you. Great being here.
Thank you, everyone.